You have made a terrible mistake. You thought you were safe. When Vesuvius began to erupt yesterday afternoon, you watched from the streets of Herculaneum as the mountain vomited a column of ash and stone into the sky. But the wind was blowing southeast, toward Pompeii, and only a light dusting of ash fell on your city. Your neighbors fled, loading carts with their possessions, heading north along the coastal road. But you stayed. You thought you were safe. Now it is 1 o'clock in the morning, and you are running toward the beach. The column of ash has collapsed, and something new is coming down the mountain. A glowing avalanche of superheated gas and rock, moving faster than any human can run. You can see it in the darkness, lit from within by its own heat. Rolling toward the city like a wave from Hell. You reach the boathouses at the harbors, edge-stone arches built into the seawall where fishing boats are stored. Hundreds of people are already crowded inside, pressed against the walls, praying, weeping, waiting for rescue boats that will never come. You squeeze in among them, your back against the cold stone, and you wait. The pyroclastic surge hits. Herculaneum at 1:30 a.m. The temperature inside the boathouses reaches 500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to vaporize flesh, to boil brains inside skulls, to turn human beings into char in less than a second. You do not suffer. You do not have time to suffer. One moment you are alive, and the next moment you are not. Your skeleton will remain in that boathouse for nearly 2,000 years. Welcome to Herculaneum. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss another journey into historical darkness. And if you're already subscribed, you know the drill. Leave a like on this video. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. And honestly, the people in those boathouses could have used some help too. Now, where were we? Ah yes, you're a skeleton now, and you've been waiting a very long time to tell your story. Everyone knows Pompeii. It is the most famous archaeological site in the world, a city frozen in time, buried under volcanic ash, preserved for 2 millennia as a snapshot of Roman life. But Pompeii had a sister city, just 5 miles to the northwest, that suffered a different fate and has a different story to tell. Herculaneum was smaller than Pompeii, wealthier, and closer to Vesuvius. While Pompeii suffocated under falling ash over 18 hours, Herculaneum was incinerated in seconds by pyroclastic surges, superheated, avalanches of gas and rock that killed everything in their path. While Pompeii's victims left hollow cavities in the ash, Herculaneum's victims left actual skeletons, bones that tell us exactly how they died and who they were. Over the next few hours, we're going to explore the city that burned while Pompeii suffocated, the luxury villas and the ordinary houses, the boathouses where 300 people died together, the papyrus scrolls that survived the fire, and the new research that is rewriting everything we thought we knew about the eruption and its survivors. This is the brutal reality of death at Herculaneum. Get comfortable. The mountain is waking up. Everyone knows Pompeii. Almost no one knows Herculaneum. This is a historical injustice that we are going to correct. Herculaneum was, in many ways, the more remarkable of the 2 cities. While Pompeii was a bustling commercial center of perhaps 20,000 people, Herculaneum was an exclusive seaside resort of about 5,000 a place where wealthy Romans built luxurious villas overlooking the Bay of Naples. The houses were larger, the decorations more elaborate, the lifestyle more refined. The city took its name from Hercules, the Greek hero who legend said had founded it. In reality, Herculaneum was probably established by the Oscans, an indigenous Italian people, before passing through Greek, Etruscan, and Samnite hands. By 89 BC, it had become a Roman municipality, and by the 1st century AD, it had evolved into one of the most desirable addresses in the Roman world. The geography was spectacular. Herculaneum sat on a promontory overlooking the sea, with views across the Bay of Naples to the islands of Capri and Ischia. Behind the city rose the slopes of Vesuvius, covered with vineyards and orchards that produced some of Italy's finest wines. The soil was rich, the climate mild, and the location perfect for wealthy Romans seeking escape from the chaos of the capital. The city was compact and well planned, with irregular gridded streets lined with two-story buildings. Unlike sprawling Pompeii, Herculaneum could be crossed on foot in minutes. The forum, baths, theater, and temples were all within easy reach. The houses featured innovations rare, even in Rome glass windows, heated floors, indoor plumbing, and elaborate gardens. But Herculaneum's greatest distinction would come not from how its residents lived, but from how they died. To understand what was lost at Herculaneum, you must first understand what existed there. This was not an ordinary Roman town. This was where the empire's elite came to escape, to relax, to show off their wealth and architectural splendor. The houses of Herculaneum were extraordinary. The House of the Stags, named for a sculpture of deer being attacked by dogs, featured a garden terrace overlooking the sea, walls covered in frescoes, and floors paved with intricate mosaics. The House of the Mosaic Atrium contained one of the finest geometric floor mosaics ever discovered in the Roman world. The House of the Wooden Partition preserved, incredibly, its original wooden furniture beds, tables, cabinets, and a partition screen that gave the house its name. The Villa of the Papyri was perhaps the most remarkable building of all. Located just outside the city walls, this enormous seaside mansion contained a library of over 1,800 papyrus scrolls, the only intact library to survive from the ancient world. The villa also housed one of the finest collections of bronze and marble sculptures ever assembled, including busts of Greek philosophers and life-sized statues of athletes and gods. The public buildings were equally impressive. The suburban baths featured elaborate heating systems, marble pools, and erotic frescoes that scandalized later excavators. The Palestra, a sports complex, included a swimming pool in the shape of a cross and bronze fountains in the form of serpents. The theater, though never fully excavated, was decorated with marble and bronze statues that rivaled those of Rome itself. This was the city that Vesuvius would destroy, a jewel of Roman civilization, home to some of the empire's wealthiest and most cultured citizens. They thought they lived in paradise. They did not know they lived in the shadow of a bomb. If you're enjoying this journey toward destruction, take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and I promise the eruption is coming soon. Vesuvius had been quiet for so long that the Romans did not know it was a volcano. The mountain was simply part of the landscape, a fertile slope covered with vineyards, rising above the bay like a benevolent giant. There were no legends of fire, no memories of destruction, no warnings of what the mountain could do. But the warnings were there for those who knew how to read them. In 62 AD, 17 years before the Great Eruption, a powerful earthquake struck the region, damaging buildings throughout Pompeii and Herculaneum. The quake was caused by magma moving beneath the surface, pushing against the rock, preparing for what was to come. The Romans rebuilt and carried on in the days before the eruption. Smaller earthquakes shook the region. Springs dried up or changed temperature. Animals behaved strangely. These were the final warnings, the mountain clearing its throat before the scream, but no one recognized them for what they were. On the morning of August 24th, 79 AD, Vesuvius exploded. The eruption began around noon with a catastrophic blast that sent a column of ash, pumice, and rock more than 30 kilometers into the sky. The column was visible for hundreds of miles, a towering mushroom cloud that darkened the sun and announced that the world had changed. Pliny the Younger, watching from Misenum across the bay, described the column as resembling a stone pine tree, a thick trunk rising from the mountain, spreading into branches of ash at the top. His uncle Pliny the Elder would sail toward the eruption to rescue survivors and to satisfy his scientific curiosity. He would not return. For the people of Herculaneum, the first hours of the eruption were terrifying, but not immediately deadly. The wind was blowing southeast, carrying most of the ash and pumice toward Pompeii. Herculaneum received only a light dusting enough to frighten, not enough to kill. Many residents fled immediately, heading north along the coastal road. Others stayed, hoping the worst would pass. They were wrong. The people who stayed in Herculaneum had reasons for their choice. The ash was falling on Pompeii, not on them. The road north was crowded with refugees. The sea offered an escape route if things got worse. They had survived earthquakes before. They could survive this. Throughout the afternoon and evening of August 24th, Herculaneum existed in a strange twilight. The sun was blotted out by the ash cloud, and artificial torches had to be lit even at midday. Ash fell like gray snow, accumulating to perhaps 20 centimeters by nightfall. The ground trembled continuously. The noise from the mountain explosions, rumbles, crashes was constant and terrifying. But the city was not being buried. Pompeii, 5 miles to the southeast, was disappearing under meters of pumice and ash, its roofs collapsing under the weight, its people suffocating in the darkness. Herculaneum was merely uncomfortable. Some residents even began to think the worst was over. We know from the archaeological evidence that some people returned to their homes during this period, perhaps to collect valuables they had left behind. Others gathered at the harbor, waiting for boats that had been sent to evacuate the population. The Roman fleet was based at Misenum, and rescue missions were underway, including the one that would cost Pliny the Elder his life as midnight approached. Hundreds of people had gathered at the beach and in the boathouses that lined the harbor. They were waiting for rescue. They were waiting for morning. They were waiting for the eruption to end. At approximately 1 a.m. on August 25th, the eruption entered a new phase. The column of ash that had been rising for 12 hours finally became too heavy to support itself. It collapsed. And Herculaneum's false safety came to an end. If you're settling in for the night, now's a good time to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment, because we're about to discuss the most terrifying phenomenon in volcanology. When a volcanic column collapses, the material does not simply fall straight down. It cascades down the slopes of the mountain as a pyroclastic surge, a superheated avalanche of gas, ash and rock fragments traveling at speeds up to 700 kilometers per hour. The temperature inside a pyroclastic surge can exceed 700 degrees Celsius. Nothing survives at 1 a.m. on August 25th. The first pyroclastic surge rolled down Vesuvius toward Herculaneum. It traveled the 7 kilometers from the crater to the city in approximately 2 minutes. The people waiting at the harbor had no warning, no time to flee, no chance to survive. The surge hit the city like a horizontal nuclear blast. Buildings were not destroyed. There was no explosion, no shockwave, but everything organic was instantly incinerated. Wood, cloth, food, animals, and human beings were all reduced to char in seconds. The heat was so intense that brains boiled inside skulls, causing them to explode. Muscles contracted in the heat, pulling bodies into the pugilistic pose, arms raised. Fists clenched, as is characteristic of burn victims. The first surge was followed by 5 more over the next several hours, each one depositing a layer of volcanic material that eventually buried Herculaneum under 20 meters of rock, the deepest burial of any Vesuvian city. This volcanic shroud would preserve the city in extraordinary detail, but would also make excavation extraordinarily difficult. By dawn on August 25th, Herculaneum no longer existed. The coastline had been extended by hundreds of meters as volcanic material filled the harbor. The city was completely buried, invisible, forgotten. It would remain hidden for more than 1,600 years. The most haunting discovery at Herculaneum came in the 1980s and 1990s, when archaeologists finally excavated the ancient shoreline. What they found has become one of the most powerful images from the Roman world. 300 skeletons, huddled together in the boathouses where they had sought shelter from the volcano. The boathouses, called fornici in Italian, were a series of stone arches built into the seawall, used to store fishing boats and equipment. Each vault was about 30 meters long and 4 meters wide, with openings facing the sea. When the eruption began, hundreds of people crowded into these shelters, hoping to be rescued by boat or simply to escape the ash falling from the sky. The skeletons were found in groups, families and strangers pressed together in their final moments. A mother holding an infant, a soldier still wearing his sword belt, a young woman clutching a jewelry box, an elderly man with the distinctive skeletal markers of a lifetime of hard labor. Rich and poor, old and young, slave and free, all died together when the pyroclastic surge arrived. The preservation was remarkable. Unlike at Pompeii, where bodies decomposed inside cavities in the ash, Herculaneum's victims were flash heated to such extreme temperatures that their soft tissues were instantly vaporized, leaving bones intact. The bones retained their original positions, telling us exactly how each person died. Many of the skeletons showed evidence of the thermal shock that killed them. Skulls had fractured from the pressure of boiling brain matter. Teeth had exploded. Bones had cracked from the rapid expansion of moisture inside them. These people did not suffer death, came too fast for pain, but the violence of their passing was written on their remains. The boathouses have become Herculaneum's most visited site, a memorial to the 300 people who died there. Their bones have been studied extensively, revealing details about Roman health, diet, disease, and social structure that no other source could provide. If you're still with me at the ancient shoreline, take a moment to hit subscribe. Your support helps me create more historical deep dives. And speaking of deep analysis, let's discuss what the skeletons of Herculaneum have taught us. The approximately 300 skeletons found in the boathouses represent one of the largest and best preserved collections of ancient human remains ever discovered. They have been studied by physical anthropologists, forensic scientists, and medical researchers, revealing an intimate portrait of life and death in Roman Italy. The demographics were telling. About 140 skeletons were adult males, 100 were adult females, and 60 were children. This ratio suggests that many men had already fled the city, perhaps to secure transportation or find safety for their families, while women, children, and the elderly waited at the harbor. The men who remained were disproportionately soldiers, several. Skeletons were found with military equipment suggesting they had stayed to help with the evacuation. The health of the Java population was surprisingly good by ancient standards. Most adults had reached their full genetic height potential, indicating adequate nutrition during childhood. Dental health was reasonable, though many showed signs of a gritty diet that wore down tooth enamel. Some individuals showed signs of healed fractures, suggesting that medical care was available and effective. But there were also signs of hard lives. Many skeletons showed evidence of heavy labor-enlarged muscle attachments, worn joints, compressed vertebrae. Some had suffered from malaria, tuberculosis, or other chronic diseases. A significant number showed signs of lead poisoning, likely from the lead pipes that carried water in Roman cities. The bones also revealed intimate details. A young woman was found to be pregnant. An infant showed signs of congenital syphilis. Several individuals had distinctive injuries or deformities that would have marked them in life. We know these people not as abstractions, but as individuals each with a body, a history, a story. Among the hundreds of skeletons found at Herculaneum, 2 have captured particular attention. A woman known as the Ring Lady, and a soldier who may have been among the last people alive in the city. The Ring Lady was found near the boathouses, not inside them. She was approximately 45 years old at death and had been a wealthy woman. Her skeleton was surrounded by gold jewelry, including 2 distinctive rings that gave her the nickname. Her bones showed signs of a comfortable life, good nutrition, no evidence of heavy labor, well-heeled dental work. But her final moments were documented in grim detail. She had been running toward the boathouses when the pyroclastic surge caught her. Her body was found face down, arms extended as if still reaching for safety. The heat had been so intense that her brain had boiled, cracking her skull from the inside. Her soft tissues had been vaporized instantly. She died running, perhaps within sight of the shelter that could not have saved her anyway. The soldier was found inside one of the boathouses, near the entrance. He was approximately 37 years old, strongly built, and still wearing his military belt with a sword attached. His skeleton showed the wear patterns of a career soldier-enlarged arm muscles from sword practice. Leg bones thickened from marching dot. What makes the soldier remarkable is his position. He was found at the entrance of the boathouse, as if he had been the last one in, or as if he had been standing guard, helping others to enter before him. His sword was still in its scabbard. He had not drawn it against the volcano. He died at his post. Whatever that post had been, these 2 skeletons, the wealthy woman running for her life and the soldier standing at the door, capture something essential about the disaster. It was a great equalizer. Wealth could not buy survival. Military training could not defeat a volcano. In the end, they all died together. The deaths at Herculaneum were fundamentally different from those at Pompeii. And understanding this difference helps us appreciate the unique horror of each city's fate. At Pompeii, death came slowly. The city was buried under meters of volcanic ash and pumice over approximately 18 hours. Most victims died from suffocation. The ash filled their lungs. The weight collapsed their shelters. The darkness disoriented and trapped them. When archaeologists made plaster casts of the cavities left by decomposed bodies, they found people in poses of sleep, of prayer, of desperate struggle. They had time to suffer, to hope, to despair. At Herculaneum, death came instantly. The pyroclastic surges killed everyone in their path within seconds so fast that there was no time for the body to react, no time for the brain to register pain. The victims were frozen in whatever position they occupied when the surge arrived, sitting, standing, running, embracing. They did not suffer in the traditional sense. They simply ceased to exist. This difference in death produced different archaeological evidence. Pompeii's famous plaster casts show bodies in attitudes of fear and agony-twisted poses, covering faces, clutching loved ones. Herculaneum skeletons show bodies in ordinary positions. The pyroclastic surge was so fast that there was no time to react. A mother sits with her infant cradled in her arms. A man lies on his back, as if sleeping. The absence of struggle is, in its own way, more disturbing than its presence. The thermal death at Herculaneum was also more complete. While Pompeii's victims left organic remains that eventually decomposed, Herculaneum's victims were essentially cremated. The soft tissues vanished in a flash of heat, leaving only bones, and not even all of those, in some cases. The archaeological record at Herculaneum is both better preserved and more fragmentary. Buildings survive nearly intact, but human remains are limited to what bone could withstand. If you're settling in for sleep, subscribe and leave a comment about what historical topic you'd like me to cover next. Because now we're going to discuss the most intellectually significant discovery at Herculaneum, the only surviving library from the ancient world. The villa of the Papyri was an enormous seaside mansion located just outside Herculaneum's city walls. It stretched for over 250 meters along the coastline, with gardens, colonnades, and rooms arranged to maximize the views of the Bay of Naples. It was probably owned by Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, Julius Caesar's father-in-law, though this identification is disputed. What made the villa unique was its library. When the pyroclastic surges hit, they carbonized but did not destroy approximately 1,800 papyrus scrolls stored in wooden cabinets. The scrolls were reduced to fragile tubes of carbon blackened, brittle, apparently destroyed, but the text inside survived, waiting to be read. The villa was discovered in 1750 by workers digging a well. Over the following decades, treasure hunters tunneled through the site, removing sculptures and mosaics, but doing immense damage to the structure. The scrolls were initially mistaken for logs and burned as fuel before their true nature was recognized. Even then, attempts to unroll them usually resulted in their destruction. The surviving scrolls have been a focus of scholarly attention for nearly 3 centuries. Most contain works of Epicurean philosophy, particularly the writings of Philodemus of Gadara, a Greek philosopher who may have lived at the villa. While not major discoveries in themselves, Philodemus was a minor figure even in antiquity. The scrolls proved that ancient texts could survive volcanic burial. The dream has always been that the villa contains other rooms, other libraries, with other scrolls, perhaps lost works of Aristotle, Sophocles, Livy, or countless other ancient authors whose writings have disappeared. Recent technology may be making that dream possible. For over 2 centuries, the Herculaneum scrolls were essentially unreadable. Any attempt to physically unroll them resulted in their destruction. The carbonized papyrus crumbled at the slightest touch. Scholars could see that text existed inside the rolls, but they could not access it without destroying what they sought to save. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source: medical imaging technology. In 2015, researchers used X-ray phase contrast tomography, the same technology used to image soft tissues in living patients, to peer inside a sealed Herculaneum scroll. They were able to detect the ink, which contained trace amounts of lead, against the carbonized papyrus background. For the first time, text was read from a scroll that had never been opened. The technology has continued to advance. In 2023, a global competition called the Vesuvius Challenge offered prizes for using artificial intelligence to read the scrolls. Within months, competitors had successfully decoded multiple passages from sealed scrolls, revealing text that had not been read in nearly 2,000 years. The recovered texts have so far been philosophical works, discussions of pleasure, music, and the good life from the Epicurean tradition. They are academically interesting, but not earth-shattering. The real excitement is what might still be discovered. The Villa of the Papyri has never been fully excavated. Only a portion of the structure was explored in the 18th century through destructive tunneling that collapsed much of what it found. Modern archaeologists believe that additional rooms and potentially additional libraries remain buried beneath the modern city of Herculaneum. If those rooms contain scrolls, and if those scrolls contain lost works of classical literature, the discovery would be one of the greatest in archaeological history. The technology to read sealed scrolls now exists. The scrolls, if they exist, are waiting. The question is whether anyone will be allowed to dig. If you're still listening, subscribe and leave a comment. Because now we need to discuss why so much of Herculaneum remains unexcavated and why that might never change. Herculaneum was discovered before Pompeii workers digging a well in 1709 hit the ancient theater bud. It has always been the harder site to excavate. The volcanic material that buried it was fundamentally different from what buried Pompeii. Pompeii was covered by ash and pumice loose, relatively easy to remove. Herculaneum was covered by pyroclastic surge deposits, volcanic material that had been superheated and then cooled into something approaching solid rock. Excavating Herculaneum required not just digging but quarrying, breaking through meters of hardened stone to reach the buildings below. The depth was also a challenge. While Pompeii lay under perhaps 4 to 6 meters of debris, Herculaneum was buried under 20 meters or more. Every meter of excavation required exponentially more work, more time, more money. And unlike Pompeii, which was buried in open countryside, Herculaneum was buried under a modern city. The modern town of Herculaneum sits directly above the ancient city. Buildings, streets, and lives have accumulated over the centuries, creating an urban fabric that cannot simply be demolished to reach what lies beneath. Every excavation must negotiate with property owners, navigate utilities, and avoid destabilizing the modern structures above. The result is that perhaps 75% of ancient Herculaneum has never been excavated. The forum, the political and commercial heart of the city, remains buried. Many residential areas are unexplored. The villa of the Papyri has only been partially revealed, with most of its rooms still encased in volcanic rock beneath modern Herculaneum. This is both a tragedy and an opportunity. What has been excavated is extraordinary. What remains buried may be more extraordinary still. Despite the challenges of excavation, what has been uncovered at Herculaneum is in many ways better preserved than anything at Pompeii. The same pyroclastic surges that killed so efficiently also preserved with remarkable fidelity. The heat was intense but brief. It carbonized organic materials, wood, food, papyrus, cloth, but did not entirely destroy them. At Pompeii, organic materials decomposed over time, leaving only cavities and mineral traces. At Herculaneum, organic materials were transformed into carbon, but retained their shapes, their textures, sometimes even their colors. The wooden furniture of Herculaneum is unique in the Roman world. Beds, tables, cabinets, screens, and decorative panels survived as carbonized shells, fragile but intact. We can see exactly how Roman furniture was constructed, how it was decorated, how it was used. The wooden partition that gives the House of the Wooden Partition its name is the only surviving example of this common Roman architectural feature. Food survived as well. Carbonized loaves of bread, still bearing the baker's stamp, have been found in Herculaneum ovens. Figs, dates, grain, and other foods were preserved in recognizable form. Even eggs were found, their shells intact around carbonized contents. These discoveries have transformed our understanding of Roman diet and food preparation. Textiles, usually the most perishable of ancient materials, survived in fragmentary form. Pieces of cloth, rope, and netting have been recovered, showing weaving patterns and fiber types that would otherwise be completely unknown. A baby's cradle was found with the carbonized remains of its textile lining still visible. This preservation comes at a cost. The carbonized materials are extraordinarily fragile. The slightest touch can cause them to crumble. Conservation is a constant battle against time, humidity, and the inherent instability of carbon. What Vesuvius preserved, time may yet destroy. If you're settling in for sleep, subscribe and leave a comment. Because now we need to understand exactly how Vesuvius killed and how modern science has reconstructed the eruption minute by minute. Herculaneum's greatest lesson may be the simplest. Nature does not care about human plans. The people in the boathouses thought they were safe. They were not. The people living on Vesuvius today think they are safe. Perhaps they are. Perhaps they are not. If you are ever in the Bay of Naples, you should visit Herculaneum. It is smaller than Pompeii, less famous, less crowded, and in many ways more powerful. The site is easily reached from Naples by the Circumvesuviana Railway, the same line that serves Pompeii. The station at Ercolano Scavi is within walking distance of the archaeological park entrance. A visit of 2 to 3 hours is sufficient to see the excavated areas. The experience is different from Pompeii, where Pompeii spreads across a broad landscape, requiring long walks between areas of interest. Herculaneum is compact and concentrated. You descend from the modern street level into the ancient city, looking down on rooftops and upper stories before reaching the streets below. The sense of burial is immediate and visceral. The preservation is astonishing. You will see wooden furniture, carbonized but intact, in the houses where it was used 2,000 years ago. You will see frescoes on walls, mosaics on floors, the entire apparatus of Roman domestic life preserved as nowhere else. You will see the boathouses where 300 people died together, their stories still being told by their bones. The site is smaller and easier to navigate than Pompeii, making it ideal for visitors with limited time or mobility. The crowds are thinner, the atmosphere more contemplative. You can stand in ancient rooms without jostling tourists, imagining the lives that were lived there. Herculaneum is not Pompeii. It is not trying to be Pompeii. It is its own place, with its own story, and its own power to move those who visit. The mountain is visible from nearly everywhere in the site, a reminder of what destroyed this city and what waits. Still, for those who live in its shadow, we end where we began, in the boathouses, with the skeletons of 300 people who thought they were safe. They were not all wealthy. The boathouses were public spaces, accessible to anyone seeking shelter. They were not all poor among the bones, or gold jewelry, fine cloth, military equipment that marked its wearer as someone of status. They were not all free. Some of the skeletons show the markers of hard labor that suggest slavery or servitude. They were mothers, fathers, children, grandparents. They were soldiers and civilians. They were lifelong residents and recent arrivals. They were people who had made choices that brought them to that beach on that night, choices that seemed reasonable at the time and proved fatal. In the end, the woman who clutched her jewelry box probably thought she was protecting her family's wealth for the future. There would be no future. The soldier who stood at the door probably thought he was helping the evacuation. There would be no evacuation. The mother who held her infant probably thought she was keeping her child safe. No place was safe. We do not know their names. The Romans kept meticulous records, but no census survives for Herculaneum. No list of the dead, no memorial to those who perished. The boathouse victims are anonymous, known only by their bones, their belongings, and the positions in which they died. But in another sense, we know them intimately. Their bones have been measured, analyzed, photographed, and studied. We know their approximate ages, their health conditions, their occupations, their diets. We know how they died and where they fell. We know details about them that their own friends and families might not have known. The dead remember. Their bodies recorded their lives in ways that have proven readable across millennia. And we, the living, have a duty to remember them, to tell their stories, to honor their humanity, to learn from their fate. They died because a mountain exploded. They died because they sought shelter in a place that could not save them. They died together, strangers and families, rich and poor, in the darkness of an August night nearly 2,000 years ago. May they rest in peace. And may we remember that the mountain is still there, still waiting, still capable of everything it did before Dot. And so our journey through Herculaneum comes to an end. The city is still there, partly excavated, partly buried, partly forgotten. The streets that Roman feet walked are open to the sky again after nearly 2 millennia of darkness. The houses that Roman families called home stand roofless but recognizable, their walls still painted, their floors still paved. The boathouses where 300 people died have become a memorial, visited by tourists who stand where the skeletons were found and try to imagine the terror of those final moments. But most of Herculaneum remains buried. The Forum, the temples, most of the residential districts all still lie beneath the modern city of Herculano, entombed in volcanic rock, waiting for excavation that may never come. The Villa of the Papyri extends into areas that have never been explored, its potential treasures unknown and perhaps unknowable. The dead who were never found, the thousands who must have died throughout the city, remain where they fell, their bones mingled with the ruins of their lives. The volcano looms over everything. From the excavated streets, you can look up and see Vesuvius, its slopes green with vegetation, its crater quiet but not extinct. The mountain that destroyed this city is still active, still dangerous, still capable of producing the same pyroclastic surges that killed everyone on the beach. 3 million people live in its shadow today, trusting in warning systems and evacuation plans that may or may not work when the time comes. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, consider what it was like. The eruption that began at noon, the false safety of Herculaneum's western position, the hours of waiting as darkness fell, and the ground shook and the mountain roared. The decision to go to the beach, to crowd into the boathouses, to wait for boats that would never come. The moment when the pyroclastic surge appeared, a glowing avalanche descending from the darkness, and the instant of annihilation that followed. Consider the woman running toward the shelter, gold rings flashing on her fingers, reaching for a safety she would never find. Consider the soldier standing at the door, sword at his side, unable to fight what was coming. Consider the mother holding her infant, the grandmother pressed against the wall, the children too young to understand why the world was ending. Consider that they were people not so different from us. They loved, they feared, they hoped, they died. They thought they were special, that their city was favored, that their lives were meaningful and their futures secure. And then the mountain reminded them that nature does not care about human plans. Herculaneum teaches us humility. It teaches us that the world we build can be unmade in moments. It teaches us that safety is often an illusion, and that the things we trust to protect us, walls, shelters, distance, can prove utterly inadequate. It teaches us that we are not masters of this planet, but guests upon it, tolerated for now, but not forever. The city burned while Pompeii suffocated. Both died, but Herculaneum's death was faster, more complete, and in some ways more merciful. The people in the boathouses did not suffer. There was no time. They were alive, and then they were not, and then they were bones waiting to be found. God rest well tonight. Rest in a world that seems stable and safe, where volcanoes are distant and disasters happen to other people. The illusion of security is comfortable, and there is no shame in enjoying it. But remember Herculaneum. Remember that the mountain is still there, still waiting, still watching. Remember that 300 people once thought they were safe, huddled together in stone shelters by the sea. Remember that they were wrong. The dead remember. They have been remembering for nearly 2,000 years. Their bones recording what their voices cannot say, remember them. And remember, always, that nothing is permanent, not cities, not mountains, not the brief flicker of human life in the shadow of forces we cannot control. Sleep well. The volcano sleeps too. For now. The eruption of 79 AD was what volcanologists call a Plinian eruption, named after Pliny the Younger, who provided the first detailed eyewitness account. It was characterized by an enormous column of gas and debris that rose high into the atmosphere before collapsing. Catastrophically, the eruption began around noon on August 24th. The initial blast punched through the rock plug that had sealed the volcano's vent, releasing pressure that had been building for centuries. A column of ash, pumice, and volcanic gas rose at speeds exceeding 400 meters per second, reaching heights of 30 to 33 kilometers within an hour. For the first 12 hours, the column was sustained by the continuous release of magma and gas. Material ejected from the column fell across the region, with the heaviest accumulation to the southeast directly over Pompeii. By midnight, Pompeii was buried under nearly 3 meters of pumice and ash. Herculaneum had received only about 20 centimeters. Around 1 a.m. on August 25th, the dynamics changed. The magma chamber had begun to empty, reducing the pressure that sustained the column. The column became unstable and began to collapse. When it did, the material did not simply fall. It cascaded down the flanks of Vesuvius as a series of pyroclastic surges. 6 surges hit Herculaneum between 1 a.m. and dawn. Each was faster and hotter than it would have been at greater distance from the volcano. Herculaneum was only 7 kilometers from the crater, compared to 10 kilometers for Pompeii. The surges buried the city under approximately 20 meters of volcanic material, extending the coastline by 400 meters and obliterating all traces of the harbor, where the boathouses stood dot by the time the surges reached Pompeii. They had cooled somewhat and lost some of their velocity. They killed the surges caused most of the deaths at Pompeii, but they did not carbonize. The different burial conditions at each city produced the different archaeological records we study today for a long time. Historians assume that everyone in Pompeii and Herculaneum died. The dramatic destruction, the preserved bodies, the abandoned buildings, all seem to indicate total annihilation. But recent research, particularly a groundbreaking 2025 study by historian Stephen Tuck, has demonstrated that thousands of people survived. The evidence is scattered but compelling. Roman inscriptions from other cities record refugees from Pompeii and Herculaneum, people who identified themselves by their former home. Census records from nearby towns show population increases after the eruption. Family names characteristic of the Vesuvian cities appear in new locations, suggesting migration. Physical evidence also supports survival. At Pompeii, archaeologists had noted that many houses show signs of systematic looting, not the random disturbance of later treasure hunters, but the careful removal of valuables by people who knew exactly where to look. These were probably former residents who returned after the eruption to retrieve their possessions. At Herculaneum, the evidence is different but equally suggestive. The boathouses contained approximately 300 skeletons, but the city's population was approximately 5,000. Where were the other 4,700 people? The most logical answer is that they fled either before the eruption began or during the 18 hours before the pyroclastic surges arrived. The roads leading away from the eye. Vesuvian cities were crowded with refugees on August 24 and 25. Contemporary accounts describe the chaos. Families separated in the darkness, belongings lost in the crush, the constant terror of the mountains' violence. Many of these refugees reached safety in Naples, Rome, or smaller towns throughout the region. The survivors faced enormous challenges. They had lost their homes, their businesses, their communities, their identities as citizens of specific cities. Many had lost family members. They had to rebuild their lives in new places, often among strangers. But they lived, and their descendants carried the memory of the catastrophe forward. If you're still with me in the shadow of Vesuvius, take a moment to hit subscribe. Your support helps me create more historical deep dives. And speaking of lives, let's explore what daily life was like in Herculaneum before the mountain ended it. Herculaneum was a city of pleasure. Its primary function was to serve as a resort for wealthy Romans, and its economy was oriented around their needs. The waterfront was lined with baths, restaurants, and shops catering to the leisured class. The residential areas were dominated by large houses with gardens, fountains, and sea views, but Herculaneum was not exclusively for the wealthy. Like all Roman cities, it required a population of workers to function: slaves, freedmen, and free-born laborers who served the elite. The skeletons from the boathouses reveal this mixed population. Some show the skeletal markers of easy living, while others show the wear and tear of physical labor. The city had a vibrant commercial district. Shops lined the main streets, selling food, wine, cloth, and household goods. A Thermopolium, a Roman fast food restaurant, has been excavated, complete with carbonized food still in its serving containers. A bakery preserved the ovens where bread was made, and the mill where grain was ground. Religion was woven through daily life. Temples to various gods dotted the city, and household shrines were found in nearly every home. The presence of Jewish and possibly early Christian communities has been suggested by some archaeological evidence, though this remains debated. That the people of Herculaneum lived ordinary lives. They worked, ate, slept, worshipped, loved, and quarreled. They raised children and buried their dead. They gossiped about neighbors and complained about the weather. They were, in short, human beings, and understanding their humanity makes their deaths more poignant. The artistic treasures of Herculaneum have filled museums around the world, and many remain in place, protected by the same volcanic material that destroyed the city. The frescoes of Herculaneum are among the finest to survive from antiquity. Wall paintings depicting mythological scenes, landscapes, and daily life were found throughout the city, their colors preserved by the carbonizing heat and protecting volcanic burial. Some have been removed to museums. Others remain in place, protected by modern shelters. The Villa of the Papyri contained an extraordinary collection of bronze and marble sculptures. Over 90 pieces recovered from the portions of the building that were excavated. These included life-sized statues of athletes, portrait busts of Greek philosophers, and decorative pieces of exquisite craftsmanship. Many are now displayed in the Naples National Archaeological Museum. The mosaics of Herculaneum were equally impressive. Floors throughout the city were decorated with geometric patterns, figural scenes, and intricate designs using tiny pieces of colored stone and glass. The House of the Mosaic Atrium takes its name from its stunning geometric floor pattern, a masterpiece of the craft that has survived nearly 2 millennia. What makes Herculaneum's art different from Pompeii's is its quality. While Pompeii was a prosperous commercial city with good but not exceptional art, Herculaneum was a resort for the empire's elite, who commissioned the finest work available. The difference is visible in the precision of the brushwork, the complexity of the compositions, and the quality of the materials. These artworks tell us something important. The people of Herculaneum were not merely wealthy but cultured. They valued beauty, invested in aesthetics, and surrounded themselves with images that reflected their education and taste. The volcano destroyed their bodies, but preserved their cultural legacy. Herculaneum was discovered by accident. In 1709, when a peasant digging a well struck the marble seats of the ancient theater. The discovery attracted the attention of local authorities and eventually of the Bourbon kings who ruled Naples. The early excavations were more like mining operations than archaeological digs. Workers tunneled through the volcanic rock, following walls and corridors, removing anything of value, and leaving the structure to collapse behind them. The primary goal was to extract treasures, statues, frescoes, mosaics, inscriptions for the royal collections. Scientific documentation was minimal. The most destructive period was the mid-18th century, when tunnels were driven through the villa of the Papyri. Workers removed dozens of sculptures and hundreds of papyrus scrolls, but they also collapsed much of the structure and burned many scrolls before their nature was recognized. We will never know what was lost during those early years. Systematic excavation began in the 19th century as archaeology developed from treasure hunting into a scientific discipline. Open-air excavations replaced tunneling, allowing buildings to be exposed and studied in their entirety. The boathouses, the forum baths, and the house of the wooden partition were all revealed during this period. The 20th century brought new challenges and new techniques. 2 world wars interrupted excavation, and the growth of modern Herculaneum above the site limited where digging could occur. But advances in conservation, documentation, and analysis transformed our understanding of what the site could tell us. Today, Herculaneum is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. But excavation continues slowly, hampered by the same challenges that have always made the site difficult: the depth of burial, the hardness of the rock, and the modern city above. If you're settling in for sleep, subscribe and leave a comment. Because now we need to address why Herculaneum remains in the shadow of its more famous neighbor. Pompeii receives over 3 million visitors per year. Herculaneum receives perhaps 300,000. Pompeii appears in countless books, films, and documentaries. Herculaneum is lucky to be mentioned in passing. This disparity is not fair. Herculaneum is in many ways the more remarkable site, but it is understandable size matters. Pompeii covered approximately 66 hectares and had a population of perhaps 20,000. Herculaneum covered about 20 hectares and had a population of about 5,000. There is simply more to see at Pompeii: more streets, more buildings, more of the sense of walking through a complete ancient city. Accessibility matters. Pompeii lies in open countryside, easily visible and easily excavated. Most of the site has been uncovered and is open to visitors. Herculaneum lies under a modern city, with much of the site still buried in what has been excavated, feeling more like an archaeological pit than an ancient town. The plaster casts matter. Pompeii's famous casts, the dog writhing in its collar, the mother sheltering her child, the man covering his face, are among the most emotionally powerful images from the ancient world. They make the disaster visceral and immediate. Herculaneum has skeletons, which are scientifically more valuable, but emotionally less accessible. But the greatest factor is simply timing. Pompeii was excavated earlier, publicized more effectively, and established itself in the public imagination before Herculaneum had been properly explored. First impressions matter, and Pompeii made its impression first. This is changing. As new discoveries emerge from Herculaneum: the scrolls, the skeletons, the organic remains, the site is gaining attention. But it may never escape Pompeii's shadow entirely. The modern town of Herculaneum poses both a challenge and a protection for the ancient city beneath it. Herculaneum was called Resina until 1969. when it was renamed in honor of the ancient city it covers. Approximately 50,000 people live there today, going about their daily lives directly above streets and buildings that have not seen sunlight in nearly 2 millennia. The relationship between the modern and ancient cities is complicated. Every excavation requires negotiation with property owners above. Every new apartment building requires archaeological assessment below. The two cities exist in perpetual tension, the living city above, the dead city below. But the modern city also protects the ancient one. The volcanic material that buried Herculaneum has been compressed and stabilized by nearly 2,000 years of weight and weather. The buildings above provide a kind of roof, preventing rain and sunlight from reaching the archaeological levels. In a perverse way, the city's burial has been its preservation. Recent years have seen renewed efforts to explore what lies beneath Herculaneum. Ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies have revealed structures below the modern street's walls, voids, and potentially rooms that have never been excavated. The Villa of the Papyri, in particular, is believed to extend far beyond what was explored in the 18th century. But excavation is expensive, disruptive, and politically complicated. Property owners must be compensated. Streets must be closed. Services must be relocated. The Italian government has limited resources and many archaeological priorities. For now, the unexplored portions of Herculaneum will remain buried waiting, like the scrolls, for a future generation to reveal them. If you're still listening, subscribe and leave a comment. Because now we need to summarize what Herculaneum has taught us about the Roman world. Herculaneum has provided unique evidence about Roman life that no other site can match. The organic preservation wood, food, textiles, papyrus offers windows into daily existence that the archaeological record usually cannot provide. We have learned about Roman diet. The carbonized food remains from Herculaneum show what ordinary Romans actually ate: bread, fish, eggs, legumes, fruits, nuts, and wine. We can trace the trade networks that brought exotic foods to local tables and the agricultural practices that sustained the local population. We have learned about Roman health. The skeletons from the boathouses have been subjected to every form of analysis available to modern science. We know about their diseases, their injuries, their diets, their occupations. We can compare the health of wealthy Romans to that of their slaves and servants, seeing the biological consequences of social inequality. We have learned about Roman construction. The preserved buildings of Herculaneum show construction techniques: roofing, flooring, plumbing, heating that are usually invisible at other sites. We can see how Romans adapted their architecture to the climate and how they integrated technology into domestic life. We have learned about Roman art, the quality of Herculaneum's paintings. Mosaics and sculptures reflects the taste of the imperial elite. The survival of these works has shaped our understanding of awe. Roman aesthetics and influenced Western art for centuries. And we have learned about Roman death. The skeletons in the boathouses are not anonymous victims, but individuals whose stories can be partially reconstructed. They remind us that history is made of people who lived, loved, and died in ways both familiar and strange. The Herculaneum scrolls represent one of the greatest opportunities and greatest frustrations in classical scholarship. The technology to read them now exists. The question is, what remains to be read? The approximately 1,800 scrolls recovered from the Villa of the Papyri in the 18th century have been partially studied for over 2 centuries. Most contain works of Epicurean philosophy, interesting to specialists, but not the lost treasure scholars dream of. The question has always been, are there other scrolls? Are there other rooms? Is there another library? The Villa of the Papyri has never been fully excavated. The tunnels of the 18th century explored only a portion of the enormous structure. Modern surveys suggest that the villa extends well beyond the explored areas, with rooms that have never been entered since the eruption. If those rooms contain bookshelves, if those bookshelves contain scrolls, the discovery could transform our knowledge of the ancient world. Imagine finding a lost play of Sophocles, a complete copy of Livy's history, unknown works of Aristotle, the autobiography of Augustus. These are the kinds of texts that might exist in an then unexcavated Roman library texts that scholars have dreamed of, recovering for centuries. The technology to read carbonized scrolls without destroying them now exists and is rapidly improving. The machine learning techniques that won the Vesuvius challenge can be applied to any scroll that can be scanned. The bottleneck is no longer reading, it is access. But access requires excavation, and excavation requires resources, permissions, and political will. The Villa of the Papyri lies partly under private property in Moderna Colano. Any excavation would be enormously expensive and disruptive. For now, the possibility of a second library remains exactly that, a possibility, tantalizing but unrealized. Vesuvius is still active. The mountain that destroyed Herculaneum and Pompeii in 79 AD has erupted dozens of times since, most recently in 1944. And today, approximately 3 million people live in its shadow. The modern city of Naples sprawls across the flanks of the volcano, with suburbs and villages extending almost to the crater rim. The area is one of the most densely populated volcanic zones in the world. If Vesuvius were to produce an eruption similar to 79 AD, the death toll could be catastrophic. Italian authorities are aware of the risk. Evacuation plans exist for the red zone closest to the volcano, and warning systems are in place to detect signs of impending eruption. But the scale of the challenge is immense. Evacuating hundreds of thousands of people in the hours or days before an eruption would be an organizational nightmare, especially in an area with limited transportation infrastructure. The lessons of Herculaneum are sobering. The pyroclastic surges that killed everyone at the beach traveled at speeds no human can outrun, and temperatures nothing can survive. Warning time would be measured in hours or minutes, not days. The only safety is distance, and distance is exactly what the modern population does not have. Climate change adds another dimension. Volcanic eruptions are not affected by climate, but the conditions that determine their impact, sea levels, weather patterns, population distribution, are changing. The coastline that was extended by the 79 AD eruption might behave differently in a future event. The variables are too many to predict with confidence.